Despite COVID-19, the City of Georgetown is still tackling a lot of issues. Today, I speak exclusively with Georgetown Mayor Brendon Barber Sr. for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Here, Brendon Barber Sr. Welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Well, Quintin, hey, it's always an honor and a pleasure to be with you. My favorite host, Mr. Quintin Washington of Quintin's Close-Ups. I tell you what, you do such a fantastic job, and the way your energy just comes through the cameras and everything. I know your audience are always excited to hear from you and who you have on your show on a daily basis, or how often it's viewed. So thank you for having me again.
Oh, you're very welcome, and thanks be to God for this opportunity to do interviews with you all. Obviously, you're the mayor of the City of Georgetown, which I love. I love Georgetown, as you know. And the last time I interviewed you was back in June here in Charleston, and I know that you talked about the new normal and you talked about the new unknown. What's the new unknown in Georgetown, and what's the new normal there?
Well, now the new normal is dealing with COVID-19. Adjusting your daily life around the protocols that are in place. And then, if you look at the vaccinations right now, that's still an unknown, because what we're hearing, even though we're receiving the vaccinations, there's still an unknown that with this new variant that's out there, we don't know if the vaccination is going to be good enough to handle the new variant. But one thing we try to stress is that even though you receive the vaccination, that does not mean you cannot get COVID-19, the virus. It just means that, now you have a less chance of supposedly being critically ill, or it lessens the fatality rate. So we don't need to relax at this time, because the new normal now is dealing with the vaccination, still maintaining our protocols, and being wary of large gatherings, not wearing masks. We should still continue to wear masks, because I'm going to receive my second shot on Friday. But I still have to wear my mask, because even if I get COVID, I can still transmit it to someone else. So it's one of those stressful things. And, what we're trying to do here is to make sure that we don't get into a situation or an environment where we create another spike, like a lot of the national and international scientists and also medical experts are saying. So that's what we are. I mean, it's just like, where you are. It's so much that are unknown that we have to deal with and try to be as safe as possible. So I hope that, kind of is going to ignite a conversation. It's not an answer, but it should ignite a conversation in the way we start to live now with this COVID-19 and the vaccinations.
What type of conversations are you hearing around Georgetown about the new vaccine?
Well, it depends on which one you're getting. Pfizer, Moderna, or the J&J, the Johnson & Johnson, the one shot.
Right.
Now, I got the Moderna and my wife got the J&J. So, we had the conversation, and she does all the research and does the comparison and all that, but she felt more comfortable getting the one shot. Now, what we're doing here, community-wide, working with Representative Carl Anderson and also one of our local pharmacies, which is, located in one of our shopping plazas, is that for this is going to be the second Sunday where they're going to provide the Johnson & Johnson shot starting at 9:15 at the Greater St. Stephen's AME Church, and it's drive up. Right. All right, you stay in your car. The pharmacists, they come up along with their technicians. They give you the shot. Right. You fill out and you go and park and wait for your 20 minutes, and then you leave. But, Sunday before last, which was about 2 weeks ago, there were 150 shots that we gave out and administered. So now here comes another Sunday. And then on top of that, Casey Fields, who, represents us at the Municipal Association, particularly the South Carolina Mayors Association, what we're in the process of doing now, working with with our association is that we're um, taking resources such as funding and partners, and we're trying to find sites where we can better serve not only municipalities, but also folks in the rural area that don't have the transportation, but there's a site that they can go to and get the shot. So, when you start talking about the new normal, it's almost like a game of basketball. As the transition occurs, you don't know whether to go ahead and fast break or slow down and set up for the best shot.
Right.
So that's what we're doing now. We're managing a crisis, but it's under a structured type, deal that we're managing crisis and trying to get everybody that we can vaccinated so that we can get through this thing and start to get back to whatever the new normal would be.
And I know you are looking around the rural areas of Georgetown County for a site. What's that ideal site right now that you're thinking about?
Well, that's something we have to look at with the different partners and also assessing the needs. And working with the partners, particularly from the municipal association, our healthcare providers here and some of the other nonprofit organizations to say, hey, look, where would be a best place to make sure that folks who have been underserved and have not received the vaccination, where they can, transportation-wise, how can they get to this site? Because transportation is a big problem here within Georgetown County, particularly from the rural areas. How can we best position ourselves to make sure they get those shots? So those are some things within the next few days. We'll be talking to some key people just to see where we can go and have this vaccination done through our South Carolina Mayors Association.
And besides those transportation issues, what are the other needs?
Well, the other needs, folks are hurting. They need food. They need help with utilities.
Sure.
On top of that, you have folks who are unemployed, underemployed, so they need employment skills training. So those are things. But when you talk to folks, one of the primary needs, and they'll tell you it's going to either be the top two, it still comes back down to transportation. Because one of the key factors in folks being underemployed and unemployed, they will tell you, say, look, I need to get to work, but I don't have transportation. And in talking to employees, you might have just the right employee that you want to hire, but how can I get that employee to the workplace? That's one of the other things. So it's just a variety of issues within the community, particularly when you're dealing with a pandemic. We're not like large metropolitan areas where we have massive transportation. So those are critical needs, transportation. And whether it's carpooling or what have you, it's still the fact that I've got to get to work, and I've got to get to work so I can make some money so that I could, at least at some point in time, maybe get some personal transportation. So these are things we just have to work through.
Yes, indeed. And I know that when I interviewed you in June, you also said you talked about the fear and anxiety at the time over the COVID testing. And you told me that simply because resources might not be there in order for you to recover. And you just mentioned that just recently. Have you heard about fear and anxiety about the vaccines, particularly in the African American community of Georgetown?
Well, I'm going to tell you, surprisingly, and like I said, 2 Sundays ago, there was a massive vaccination effort with Representative Carl Anderson and the Greater St. Stephen's AME Church, and also the medicine shop. And, I was there. I was a part of that, helping with, making sure logistically people were moving along and talking to folks. But at that particular time, I would say over 95% of the people who got vaccinated were African Americans. So the fear seems to be subsiding, but the greatest fear is not getting the vaccination. That's what I'm hearing, is not getting the vaccination. And that's due to the education and the conversations that folks are having, not only within our community, but throughout the state and throughout the nation. And I think folks are feeling a little bit more at ease about getting the vaccination because of the information that's coming across the media, and because, you have your show, and we're getting that word out there that it's better to get 1 of the 3 in your own. Okay? Because if we could decrease the amount of people that are being hospitalized, fatality rate go down, then we're in a better position. But we have to also be conscious that even though we get that vaccination, and we'll repeat it over and over and over again, even though we get that vaccination, it does not prohibit us from getting the virus itself. It's just that it lessens the effect of the virus.
And how many people have been vaccinated thus far in the city of Georgetown?
I can't give you a number because if you look at folks who show up at our centers that are given vaccinations, they're coming from all over the county. So we would really have to go back to the DHEC site. You have the DHEC site, and then you also have, the CDC site. So you would have to look at those numbers, because what you're looking at is there are a number of people that have already received their first shot, and then they're still waiting on that second shot. So the completion of the rate is, it's kind of hard to figure out. I know it's better than it was at the beginning. So we've seen an increase in the numbers. But hey, if I don't know, I sure can find out.
Sure. And speaking of numbers, Mayor, I'm pretty sure that there are a lot of things that you all want to get done for the city of Georgetown, and I'm pretty sure the current budgetary restraints won't allow it. What kind of budget rules that you have in place right now?
Well, one thing I have to commend our finance department on is that they've always been, their fiduciary responsibility as far as finance has always followed, the GAP principles and making sure we're doing what we're supposed to do. So we've always been very transparent with our budget, and the budget has always been, at least for the past 3 years, we've had a surplus. So that tells you something right there. When the pandemic hit, what we did immediately, we all non-essential expenditures, we just put a halt on that because we did not know what impact it was going to have on our revenue. If you're talking about accommodation and hospitality taxes, business licenses, things that people normally had the revenue for to pay, some of those things some people just they either had a decrease or they had no money at all to pay those things. So we kind of looked at that, and going into this budget year, just to further it, due to the decrease in revenue for the pandemic, we're probably going to look at a budget that's going to be, over budget. When I say over budget, or it will be in the red, and it's going to be in the red because you couldn't make up for the entire revenue based on revenue you would generally get. But overall, our finance department has received awards statewide and everything you can think of. And I mean, they've just been such a great help to this city, the entire financial department, from the director on down. They've kept us out ever since I've been on council and been the mayor. Right. They've kept us true and blue.
Yes, indeed. And let me ask you this. How are the budget target reductions allocated across all of the city's departments?
Well, it's based on needs. And of course, our primary concern is to make sure we keep our services going. Sure. Whether it's public works, law enforcement, fire, water utilities, and also electric utilities, because we're one of the few cities, we're an electrical city. We have our own electrical department where we buy power wholesale, but then we go ahead and distribute that power and sell it back to our citizens, because we're an electrical city. So we're one of the few in the state that have our own electric utilities. So therefore, when you start looking at O&M, operation and maintenance, you have your guidelines financially. So your administrator and your finance director work along with the department heads to determine those needs. Because what we want to do, and we were very fortunate during the pandemic, and this speaks, volumes of our employees, department heads and all, we have not had to furlough or lay any employees off. So that tells you something right there. Yes. And still maintain services.
Right. Yes, indeed. And let me ask you this. What with the COVID situation affecting the local economy so badly, how has it affected those tax revenues that the city needs to fund, certain projects?
Well, at one point, and like I said, our non-essential expenditures, we really what we did, we put a delay on that because we want to see what it looks like probably in when we move further along in 2021 and do a reassessment because we had to put a hold on some of those things. But overall, you when we started, I would say probably into the first and second quarter of the pandemic, we saw where we were down probably about anywhere from 30 to 35% of revenue, and but we were able to manage, and we were able to come back in January and make some adjustments where we were able to financially do some things and amend the budget where we were able to make sure our employees got what their needs were, whether that's salaries or what have you, and then we were able to further provide some other resources financially. So that's the way we were look. We were careful and very conservative on how we administered the funds during this COVID-19, due to the fact that we knew we were going to have some type of percentage decrease in revenue.
Yes, sir. And did you ever think throughout this entire time to just give up your salary for a year?
No, I mean, look, our salaries basically they can hardly buy you lunch. we don't make the big salaries like some of the mayors and council members. I mean, if you look at our salaries, you say, "Well, wait a minute, these guys are really struggling. They're volunteers."
Yeah.
But no, we didn't have to do that. We were able to maintain what we receive as a salary, which is a part-time salary, but also make sure our employees had livable wages.
Yes, indeed. And what are the current revenue trends for your particular city?
Pardon me?
And what are the current revenue trends for your city?
Well, basically, if you look at our budget is to make the budget whole. We have what we call the general budget. Then we have our enterprise fund. So when you look at your enterprise fund, that's what we call revenue generating. So that's all utilities. That's your electric utilities, your water utilities, et cetera, et cetera. Those funds that folks pay for, okay, through rates and what have you, fees. Then on the general side, of course, you have your business license, your property taxes, and all that. Now, that general fund, that includes your law enforcement, your fire, your administrative costs, finance, all those things like that. So these are services where those funds, provide the necessary departments to do their work the best that they can. So when you put those two together, then you have to come up with a balance. Try to come up with a balanced budget. Whether you're looking at a deficit or not, you still have to figure out how can we operate as a city.
Hmm. And what is the current operating budget for the city?
Well, we're right around. We're going to have a budget workshop tomorrow.
Right.
Okay, and generally we're between. Folks say, well, the city of Georgetown, how can you operate on a $30 million plus budget? Well, we do it. Okay, so it's always going to be right around not the right around the low 30s. So a 30 million, 32, 33, $34 million budget, depending on where we fall as far as the revenues that are coming in. And we're probably going to be at a deficit, this year due to COVID.
Right.
So those are the things you look at. So overall, when you look at the size of a budget, it's really not a large amount of money. Okay.
Right.
But for a city our size, like I said, our employees, particularly our finance people, and also our administrative staff, which is our city administrator, they do a fantastic job along with the directors in managing that. Because look, Quentin, at the same time, we're in the low country now, so we flood.
Yes.
So now you're talking about storm water, you're talking wastewater, you're talking regular water. These are capital projects you have to make sure that you try to update and keep going. But being in the low country, and in Charleston, regardless of how much money you try to put in to prevent flooding, king tides and where we live plays a role in moving water. And sometimes you have every technical advantage you can think of, but Mother Nature lets you know that once these systems reach capacity, that's it. So, we're going to flood. But, overall, I think for a city our size and the budget that we have to deal with, I think we've maintained that quite well over the years.
And where exactly has property taxes provided significant revenue for the city?
Well, it does. I mean, we depend on that. And if you look at, property taxes, of course, that comes through the auditor's office, which is the county.
Right.
And those assessments.
Right.
So a lot of times when you're looking at property taxes, you're like, well, the city, they did this and did that. But actually, it's the assessor's office that come back and do the assessment. So we depend on that. The other thing that we depend on is that we've created what you call a TIF district.
Right.
That's a tax incremental financing district. So hopefully that's going to generate some other revenue through development, because as people improve their property within that TIF district, that's going to generate more revenue into the city.
And where are those property improvements in those TIF districts right now in Georgetown?
Well, basically, as long as some of your main corridors, like coming in on Highway 17 on Fraser Street, whether you want to say South Fraser, and as Highway 17 goes north to Myrtle Beach, that's Church Street and what have you. Front Street, which is the Central Core Business District. Even folks don't know, but the steel mill itself is in the TIF district,
right?
And all that area there. What we were very conscious of is that we didn't want to put the TIF district in residential areas, because there's still a big conversation on displacement and what have you when it comes to a TIF district being in a residential section.
Okay.
So that's more research you have to do when you're looking at TIF districts.
Absolutely. And I'm pretty sure, well, you mentioned it earlier, but I'm pretty sure at some point you had to dip into the reserves. How much have existing fees and charges have been raised because of COVID?
Well, it's not because of COVID. It's just that if you look over a 10-year period, we were way behind with rates, whether it was water utilities, particularly water utilities. We've been so far behind with that. And, we have to increase rates, and we're doing that gradually. So if you look at a 10-year period and you don't do anything as far as your rate increase, it's going to catch up with you sooner or later. So it's been throughout, I think we started probably about 3 years ago, starting to look at our rates, because what you want with your enterprise departments, you want them to be self-sufficient. In other words, you don't want them to be in a deficit, because they're in the actual line of work of providing a service that you have to pay for. And it's just like any other business. In order to keep up with the O&M and manpower, materials you have to supply, and all this stuff that's cost, you got to have a rate that you have to charge to keep up with it, so you can't be in a deficit, and then you have to borrow from this department or that department to try to balance the budget, or to try to get rid of a deficit. Right. You're just moving paper at that point.
That's exactly right. And you talked earlier about water. What data are you looking at, Mayor, as far as pipes that do not meet current code requirements to provide adequate water pressure for firefighting and domestic water usage in the city?
Well, matter of fact, I'm glad you brought that up, because we're just getting ready. We just voted on a community block development grant to help us just with water flow on the west end, replacing those old galvanized pipes with, PCV. I mean, we're going to move on and make sure that the water pressure is there where it needs to be. And we've done some major water improvements throughout the city. I tell you what, particularly, folks, we were replacing water pipes down there in the historic district probably a couple of years ago, and we ran into some issues where you had pipes that were so old. I think they were in the archaeology date before time. But when you look at those systems, and we're still looking at these systems, we're a historical city, so we have some systems that's very, very dated. That's one of the main goals for this city, is to make sure that we update the entire system and replace all those old pipes with the new materials that sustain us and also increase that water pressure.
And what are those new materials?
Well, hey, PCV. Those pipes. That's what they're using now, and you see them as you travel. They could be the large blue ones,
right,
or the other small ones, whether they're a 1 inch or 2 inch or what have you. But you have your large ones, and then as you engineer your system and you go for distribution, the pipes become a little smaller going into residential homes or into businesses.
And as a matter of fact, where on the West End do the water mains need actual improvements?
Well, actually, there are a couple of streets. You look at Emmanuel Street, you look at Gilbert, you look at, you can go ahead and look at Winyall Street. There are a number of streets where we need those improvements. And if you look at our last city council meeting, all of the streets are actually identified and detailed in the next water system improvements for the West End.
The West End. And let me take you back up to North. I always get it mixed up when I get up there too, but North Fraser, right up there where the old City Hall is. What is the latest on that right now with the new City Hall?
Well, right now, we canceled the City Hall project.
Oh,
because of COVID-19. So what we did, we took the monies that we had set aside for the City Hall and we put it in a restrictive account. And that money is being held there for when we get to a point that we feel that we need to go ahead and start the process for a City Hall. Whether that's buying land, trying to locate a building new, or what have you. But we just felt that with COVID-19, not knowing the future, that it was more important to keep people working and to have money in the city finance department than to go ahead and try to do something that was a major, capital improvement, which would take away from finance. And the reason being, no one knew, and we still don't know, the unknowns of how COVID-19 has impacted a lot of the cities. So just to be conservative, we put that money aside, and God, that's been a blessing. We didn't have to use it for any emergencies, but it's there for, a city facility to house administration, finance, building and planning, and what have you.
And do you want to have the new City Hall on the old City Hall property?
I think that's still up for debate. Whether we have whether we build a new City Hall, whether we look at a building, whether we look at, other property, that's something that council would have to decide.
Yes, yes,
I think COVID-19 makes you slow down and think and replan and strategize on what you really need to do.
And what do you really need to do when it comes to capital projects around the city?
Well, basically, it depends on your funding source, whether that's through grants. So what we do is we try to make sure that those capital projects that are necessary, that are high importance to keep services going, those are the projects we're going forward with. Stormwater projects, when I say stormwater, that's to help with flooding in certain parts of the city. So there are those projects that are getting ready to be implemented. Then there are other projects, whether it's, providing you know, good water pressure throughout the city. And also when you put in the new pipes and stuff, the water's a lot safer in those new pipes than the old pipes. So these are things that are necessary. And then also, when you talk about capital improvement projects, you also talk about service to the city. So you gotta have a city that looks good. So you want to make sure public works and everybody else. And folks talk about capital improvement, but you also have to look at equipment too. That falls in that same niche, because if the employees don't have the right equipment to work with, then services lack. So it's across the board. It's you think it's stressful. We know it's very stressful for our employees, our citizens, and what have you. But then there's a lot of stress, just from the finance standpoint, trying to work through this pandemic.
Yes, indeed. And speaking of pandemic and speaking of city council, I know this is way off, Mayor. It's a few months off, but I know last time when I spoke with you, Quintin's close-up, she said the city of Georgetown announced last year the 2024 July fireworks celebration will be canceled to try to
Right.
minimize the COVID cases. Is that the plan for 2021?
Well, we're looking at numbers now. I'm not the medical folks, and I'm going to tell you like this. I go by what the medical experts and the scientists will tell us what to do. I think it's our not only our fiduciary responsibility, but I'm accountable to a higher power than man, and that's to make
God.
sure we protect life. God, God, I'm a praying mayor,
Yes.
and prayer works, man. Along with works, you got to pray.
Yes.
But we're going to make sure that we provide the safest environment that we can in the city of Georgetown. And whatever the medical experts and the scientists tell us to do, that's what we'll do. And if we're patient enough, I think we'll get to a point where we can have events. Whether they're going to be on a particular date or a month, I can't tell you that right now. But I do know that we will have those events. But, it's important, Quintin, that everybody gets vaccinated. And once they get vaccinated, they need to still follow the protocols. Because the last thing we want to do is shut down. We don't want a city to get to a point where they spike and you have businesses that can't operate because employees are getting COVID. They're getting COVID-19 and then they got to shut down. It just doesn't make any sense. We're going to have to be our brother's keepers.
Yes, sir. And you talk about if you might maybe have some events opening back up in the city. Will you have the money for the 4th of July celebration?
With those things for the 4th have already been paid for.
Okay.
So whenever it's safe enough, those type things have already been paid for.
Okay. And let me ask you this. What data are you currently looking at to keep the city's mask mandate in place for another 30 to 60 days?
Well, CDC, Dr. Fauci, DHEC, and, like I said, the medical experts and talking to them. And we already know that the encouragement from our national medical experts, state and all, they realize how important it is to still wear that mask.
Mayor Brendon Barber Sr., thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
And Quintin Washington, my man, best in the business.
Thank you.